Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about some big time conference matchups, some big time upset potential with Houston playing Texas Tech. We have Mississippi State, Texas A&M. We have Florida, Texas. Some big time games that could go opposite directions, and we're all looking around trying to figure out what happened this past weekend. Could just be one of those weekends. But we'll get into that as it unfolds. Right now, let's get into a couple other games. Some teams that just have to get right. Some teams that are going to be in matchups that might just go down to the wire. And let's talk about it right now. Let's start this thing off with an interesting one over there in Athens. Kentucky goes on the road to number 12, Georgia. Georgia favored by 20.5 in this game. Obviously, coming off the Alabama loss, they get a Kentucky team that I don't know what's going on with that quarterback position. I have no earthly idea who's going to start in this game. It's been Cutter Boley the last couple of weeks. Hasn't been great the last couple of weeks, so we'll see how that unfolds. Zach Calzada, obviously still an option there. It'll be interesting. At the very least, it'll be interesting to see what they do there. I think it'll be Cutter Boley, but who knows at this point. For Georgia, they can't have any bad misses this year. That's the big thing with this football team. Obviously, losing that game to Alabama stinks, but that's not a bad miss. That's a good football team that you lost to. At the end of the day, if you're going to find a way to make it to the CFP, there's too many landmines on here. There's too many genuinely tough games to lose a game like Kentucky. Period. End of story. They're going to have to find a way to do it. Whenever Kentucky invites Georgia into Lexington, things get interesting. It goes 13-12, or a couple years ago, I believe it was 13-10, something like that. So it always gets weird whenever it's over in Lexington. When it's in Athens, the Dogs absolutely roll. I think they do that. I think Chauncey Bowens, the running back for Georgia, has a huge game in this one. Wisconsin at number 20, Michigan. This is a big noon kickoff. This is going to be a very interesting game, and one that I don't know, just has a little bit more juice than maybe I think some people are thinking, plainly because I don't think Michigan's going to be able to run the football very consistently in this game. Now, I think they're going to be able to do enough. I do think Michigan wins this game. I'll give a little spoiler. They're favored by 17.5. I think that was kind of understood. But at the end of the day, if they're a CFP team, if they're a team that is going to make the CFP, they're going to be able to at least compete for a national title. They should be able to dominate here. Not necessarily totally roll over them, run for 400 yards, and feel like you're the best team that's ever played football. But at the end of the day, you saw what Alabama did to Wisconsin. That's roughly what Michigan should be able to do. Probably not the same style, probably not in the same way, but you got to find a way to roll over this football team because this is not a team in Wisconsin that should really scare you all that much this season. So it'll be interesting to see how this one goes. Wisconsin's still very good against the run. So can Michigan find a way to get the run game going? Obviously, Bryce Underwood makes that a little bit tougher to stop the run than it was against a team like Alabama that doesn't have that quarterback run game in there. But will be really interesting to watch. With Sharon Moore back on the sideline, how do they utilize Bryce Underwood? Do they utilize his legs a little bit more in this game? Do they scale it back because they think they might not need it in this game? But at the end of the day, I think they're going to stop the run pretty well. I think they're going to sell out to stop the run. I think Bryce Underwood makes a couple of big throws. I don't think this is necessarily a coming out party because I think people know that he's pretty darn good at football at this point, but I do think he has a big time game here. I think they win by 20. I think they prove that they are very well on their way to a CFP this year. Number 7, Penn State on the road at UCLA. Penn State kind of just gets a vacation to LA, which is a pretty cool thing for a number of Big Ten teams, specifically this year when you're talking about UCLA. You're going to be able to beat this team. You should be able to beat them by a lot. And then just enjoy LA, I guess. Just go out, have a good time, because this is essentially a vacation with some football mixed in. You should be able to roll over this team. You're favored by 25.5. You should be able to cover that 25.5 as far as I'm concerned. For Penn State, it's as simple as I want to see Drew Aller do the thing. I want to see him go out there, let it rip. I really do mean this. I don't think this is a game where you put the ball in your pocket, you run the football, you make sure you just lean on them. Obviously, you're going to have to do that at some point this season. I want to see Drew Aller go out there and throw for 400 yards. I want him to do absolutely crazy stuff in this game, build his confidence, and go into the rest of the season thinking this is a guy that can rip the ball around the football field. Obviously, we know he has the arm talent. I want to see that guy's confidence go up because early in that football game against Oregon, he had just about none. The second he hit that ball to Devontae Ross, it was a different football player. Obviously, you make the mistake at the end of the game that kind of puts a sour taste in your mouth, but the reality of the matter is This kid can rip the ball around. You have to be able to trust him. If you can't trust him, you're not going to be able to win these big games down the road. Let him do the thing against this team, because even if things go poorly, you're still probably winning this game by 14 points. So rip the ball around. Play around with things on offense. Don't get too cute. Just line it up. Let this guy throw the balls that he is very capable of throwing and win this game by 28 plus points. Boise State on the road at number 21 Notre Dame. I don't know if this one's overlooked. It's one of those games where Boise State got dominated by South Florida in week 1. They've looked relatively good since. They got a big win over App State last week. They're a team that still is kind of finding itself, and I still think it's a very good team. Sire Gaines is finding himself at running back. They have a number of guys on the outside that can make some big plays. Obviously, Maddox Madsen is a confident and competent quarterback here. For Notre Dame, it's really simple here. Do you have any let up? Is there a moment here where you let yourself kind of take your foot off the gas? Obviously, you have that 2-2 record, so you shouldn't. That's the reality. You should know that you have to win out the rest of the way if you want any chance of making the CFP, plain and simple. You should understand that. There is a world here where they see this Boise State team and they see the 19.5 point spread and they just take their foot off the gas just a little bit. And they open the door and a team like Boise State comes in and kicks it down. I tend to believe Notre Dame's able to win this game. I tend to believe they're going to be able to win it relatively comfortably. I think there's a world here where they open the door just a little bit and Boise State's able to make a couple of plays, and we look up late in the third quarter and Boise State's up by 3 points and we're trying to figure out what Notre Dame's going to do to find their way back into the CFP race. I think they win. I think they win relatively comfortably. I think there's an opening here, though, that some people might kind of dismiss. Maybe my favorite quarterback battle of the entire weekend. It might be outdone by one we're going to talk about here in a second, but Washington at Maryland, they go all the way across the country after a tough game against Ohio State where they just got physically beaten up. I'll just be totally honest with you. But Damon Williams Jr. against Malik Washington. Malik Washington, if you have not watched this kid, watch him. A true freshman over there at Maryland that is playing incredibly good football, is a guy that's going to do incredible things over the next couple of years, hopefully for the Terps. I'm very hopeful that he will stick around up there and be able to do some incredible things for Maryland going over the next couple of seasons. As of right now, they are 6.5 point dogs to a team that just lost at home and has to travel all the way across the country. Could be a really interesting spot here for Maryland. They're an undefeated team. If they win this game, who knows what happens with Maryland the rest of the way. I tend to believe they're not necessarily a Big Ten title threat, but there's a moment here where Maryland can get a big-time win and suddenly become the talk of the town. Maybe be a ranked team and be in the mix going forward. But I think Washington's able to get this one done. I think leaning on Jonah Coleman's going to be a big thing in this game, and they're able to run the football just enough on Maryland. I think it's going to be incredibly close. I don't fully get the 6.5 line. If anything, I would have this at 1.5 or 2.5. I think it's going to be a very close football game. But at the end of the day, I think Washington's run game is enough to get this one done. I think there's going to be enough on the defensive side of the ball that Washington can do to at least confuse Malik Washington some. I don't think it's going to be a perfect game from that defense, but I'll say Jonah Coleman and that Washington defense does enough. They get a close win on the road. Minnesota at number 1 Ohio State. Ohio State just keeps rolling along, and now they get the Golden Gophers coming to town. Drake Lindsey is another guy at quarterback that I think is a little bit under-talked about. Very fun redshirt freshman at Minnesota that is kind of ripping the ball around. I don't expect him to roll in this football game because I don't expect anyone to roll in any football game against Ohio State this year, especially at quarterback. I said it earlier, I believe on Twitter earlier this week, I don't think anyone's scoring 21 points on this football team. I'll be totally honest. In this entire season, maybe Oregon in a playoff or Big Ten title situation, maybe a team like Alabama if they put it all together. But at the end of the day, I don't even think them. I think there's a nightmare of a defense. I think Minnesota is going to be lucky to find their way to 10, if I'm being totally honest in this game. The interesting thing here is you do have a trip to Illinois on deck if you're Ohio State. Maybe that's a little bit of an opening for Minnesota to make this thing close early. We've seen what Ohio State's doing this year. It is not the same approach. They are very much a run-first team, and then we'll take those little dink-and-dunk passes, will hurt you. At some point, they're going to take the top off. It's not going to be in this football game. I think they win it. Maybe that 23.5 is worth it, if I'm being totally honest, because they just don't have the need to dominate this Minnesota team to the degree that they probably would have 4 or 5 years ago, being them 45-6. Now it's probably 30-3, but it's still plenty impressive. This is my favorite quarterback battle of the week. There are so many incredible battles between quarterbacks, but this one's really fun. Darian Mensah and Jaron Kiave Sangapula-Tele are two NFL talents, plain and simple. These guys throw the football all over the field, and I think the funny thing about Duke, they lose 2 games early on in the season out of conference. They're still 2-0 in the conference, and they win this one on the road all the way across the country. I think you're in a position where you could run the table and be the team to talk about in the ACC. You could be the team that finds a way to the ACC title against a Florida State or a Miami or maybe a Georgia Tech. Whoever knows how that conference ends up playing out. But I think this one's going to be really fun. I think JKS has been about as fun as any quarterback in the entire country this year. There's been a little bit up and down play from him as of late. Obviously, that San Diego State game really did get away from him, but I think Duke finds a way to get this one done. I think it's going to be really fun. I think they go back and forth. I think it's a great reason to stay up till probably about 1 a.m. my time. But at the end of the day, I think this one's going to be really fun. I think Duke finds a way to get this one done and probably sets up a huge matchup with Georgia Tech coming to town in a couple of weeks. But I'll take Duke in this one. I'll take Darian Mensah to win the QB battle that I just cannot wait for in week 6. But it's a really fun weekend. There's a number of games where you look at them and maybe at face value, they don't really jump off the page. They're not the craziest things in the world. And then you start thinking about it and you think, Texas really hasn't looked all that good this year. Maybe they do lose to Florida. Texas Tech does have that quarterback injury. Maybe they fall to Houston. I think this is one of those weekends where you just have a lot of different things happen very, very quickly, and you're looking up at the end of it thinking, I don't know who's going to win any of these conferences, but we'll get to it all, obviously. Our last segment, right after this break, we're going to get into the best bets. I have a number of them coming for you this week. Didn't do too well last week, so hopefully we can bounce back this week with a couple of favorites that I feel weirdly confident about. We'll get into it right after this, so stick with us.